This podcast is sponsored by Cornerstone Healing Center, where they guide people through a transformative experience and into lasting recovery. They focus on addiction, trauma, family systems, and co-occurring disorders. If you want more information on how to get sober, call them at 1-888-320-7992 or check out their website, scottsdalecornerstone.com. Hey everyone, it's Brandon Lee, host of the podcast Escaping Rock Bottom. I have a badass guest on the show with me today. Estil is the founder of Cornerstone Healing Center in Scottsdale. I had a chance to tour the facility last month, and it's really cool the different modalities that they are using to help people recover from drug addiction and alcoholism. And so he's on the show today to talk about what they're doing over at Cornerstone Healing Center, but he's also got a story himself, experience, strength, and hope. That's what this podcast is all about, especially in the midst of a pandemic when a lot of people are losing their shit. And it's okay to not be okay. So Estil's on the show today. Hey, man, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Estil, I start this off with everybody. Where were you born and raised?
Born in Clinton, Missouri. Left in foster care as an infant. Adopted at the age of 2. Raised here in Arizona.
Okay. Raised in Arizona since the age of 2?
Yeah, so I grew up
call
here.
You a native.
Pretty close. Yeah, all my memories are from here.
When did you...
You know where the Wedge is in South Scottsdale?
Oh, I thought you meant like the Wedge in Newport Beach, like the surf spot.
No, so this is a skate spot here.
Okay.
Underneath a bridge, McDowell and Miller. I grew up hanging around. Phoenix locals, a lot of Phoenix locals know that place.
Okay.
There's a skate park there now, but I grew up hanging around there.
I want to know if that was named after the Wedge in Newport Beach, like
could be
the biggest surf spot in Southern California.
It could be. There's like this big concrete thing, and people just skateboard and ride bicycles, and it's been kind of a landmark.
All right,
kind of an underground landmark for a long time.
So the next question is, when did you always start kind of going off the rails a little bit? Like, when did the little rebellious Estil start to appear?
Shit. I don't know. Pretty early. Early, I suppose, is a fair answer. 7, 8. 7, 8. I was getting to sneaking beers and, puffing on cigarettes and not being totally honest about what I was doing with my time and grade slipping and all that. So yeah, pretty young.
Junior high school is when I first had a cigarette, and some kids at school, we went straight for the Marlboro Reds. Yeah, we just I guess that was like the early addict in me. I was like, no Marlboro Lights, let's just go to the local donut shop. And they would sell cigarettes back in the day to kids in junior high school, which is like nuts. Could you imagine like a Circle K selling a junior high schooler cigarettes these days? No. All right. So what happened next? Like, what would you just kind of get worse? Was it a lot of drinking, kind of hanging out in social circles?
I got into sneaking beers, drinking, smoking weed, that sort of thing. And I guess by the time, it was all very experimental until I was around 16 or so. By the time I was 16, I was drinking daily. I was experimenting with things like methamphetamine. 17, I'm a daily blackout drinker. I did not graduate high school. I went to Arcadia High School and I couldn't make it through. In my senior year, I was drinking to blackout in the morning. So by second or third period, I couldn't make it through class anymore, and I just didn't make it through high school. Left home, 18, mutual fuck you between mom and dad. And when I say mom and dad, they're my grandparents, right? They adopted me. So I left home shortly after not completing high school, and it was where it was already getting pretty bad. It just went downhill.
What was the situation, if you want to share with your parents? Why did your grandparents have to adopt you?
Oh, my biological parents are alcoholics. They never straightened out. Not that I'm aware of. My biological father did get sober after suffering an alcoholic stroke about 12 years ago. And then I buried him of natural causes. Multiple system failure at like 64. That was just a year ago.
How do you think that impacted you? I mean, I'm a believer, Estil, that trauma really, for most people, 9 out of 10, I'm going to say, I think traumatic experiences, whether it be a childhood or even trauma that you experience as an adult, is really kind of the gateway that sets people off, is the gateway that gets people to turn to another substance in order to not feel. So whether it's drugs or alcohol. Growing up in a family where mom and dad are alcoholics and unable to pay attention to you and care for you and nurture you can be considered a traumatic event. How do you think that that impacted you in your upbringing, that mom and dad weren't there in the mom and dad structure?
It's a great question. It's something that I ignored as a young person, and even into my early recovery, I didn't pay it much reverence. Came up in an inventory, obviously. Well, I fucking hate them. They weren't there. They abandoned me, etc.
Huge resentments, I would assume.
All my early relationship problems with women were tied easily by my sponsor back to my relationship with my biological mother, my non-existent relationship. So it really wasn't until staying sober for a while and working with a therapist that I was really able to go backwards and really look. So ACE testing, I'm sure you're familiar with, Adverse Childhood Experience Testing. It's a very simple assessment tool. And there's a lot of predictors nested within what your answers are. So it's a 1 to 10, 10 being the worst, 0 being the least. Anything over a 4 generally is going to have a high propensity for drug abuse, for substance use. So that's kind of what we look for in treatment. We're looking for, we just look at those scores, and without even knowing somebody's name, gender, race, etc., by that number, I could tell you, if you're a 0, you probably don't, your chances of having substance problems are much lower statistically. It's not an impossibility, right? Trauma doesn't necessarily make you a drug addict. And there are people that have experienced and survived traumatic experiences that never got into substances.
True.
But those are outliers. We're talking, if you're a 4 and up, you probably got a substance problem and you probably sleep around. I mean, statistically speaking, I'm an 8.
You're an 8.
Yeah. Figured that out pretty quick. I was like, oh, that explains a lot about the path I ended up on.
Yeah. And a lot of that stuff, when you said that you really kind of forgot about it, that childhood experience, it's no different. It's also one of why the modality EMDR exists in the treatment and recovery world, is because that modality actually allows us to get past the frontal lobe, get back to where we compartmentalize a lot of those traumatic experiences. When we suffer whether it be a trauma as a child or a trauma as an adult, experiencing trauma is unpleasant. So naturally, our bodies are not going to want to remember it or feel it. So we compartmentalize it and we bury it. And we try to move forward. The problem is that when that traumatic event happens, it throws off our wiring just a little bit. And then we begin to misfire. It's why I like that common phrase of I'm making poor life choices, right? Those wires are crossed and we're misfiring and we're making a lot of poor life choices. Yeah. EMDR is a modality that allows us to get past this, back to here, and work through that trauma. It's not a lobotomy, right? We don't forget. We don't those traumatic events don't get erased.
I just saw that Ratchet show and they were like,
you just
they were doing lobotomies. It was fucked up. Sorry.
But it allows us to process that trauma in a different way so that we don't react the same way when another traumatic event happens.
Yeah, you're exactly right. It allows us to archive that experience in the past, in our history, where it belongs.
Yeah.
Not beneath the surface of every fucking moment.
Okay, because I want to eventually get to what you guys are offering at Cornerstone Healing Center. And what brought you into that world of creating a treatment program and a healing center to help people.
Sure.
But what was your rock bottom then? What was that moment for Estil in your life that said, because is that not truly a hugely common question, whether it be for parents or family members or friends of an addict being like, what's their rock bottom? People ask me all the time, how'd you know when you hit your rock bottom? I'm like, oh, other people may have said, Brandon, man, you hit your rock bottom over here. And I'm like, no, I wasn't done yet. What was your rock bottom like?
Gosh, there were multiple, I would say 5 or 6 different experiences where I thought it was the bottom. I made firm resolutions to stop this behavior, stop this self-destructive behavior, and thought it was the end, and then it wasn't. That's a lot of fun. And for me, the one that actually was the bottom, I got to tell you, I'd been in worse, big air quotes, I'd been in worse positions than this time, but I found myself, I got picked up on ASU campus by Tempe campus police. I was riding a children's mountain bike. I'm grown up. I'm a grown man. Riding a children's mountain bike, looking for a better bicycle to steal. And when they stopped me and started asking me questions I couldn't answer, like, where are you coming from? Where are you going? I just, in that moment, I kind of surrendered. I was just like, well, I'm going to go to jail and I'm just going to do whatever they need me to do, because I can't lie my way out of this. I got nothing. And I got re-exposed to the 12-step world while I was in Durango jail. And a lot of it didn't make sense, but there was this thing at the core of it that did make sense. And I was intrigued. I was intrigued that people from different religious backgrounds, so because I was super skeptical, right? To hear this dude that was like sort of like agnostic, almost atheist, and this other guy that was like pretty devout Jewish guy, give me their recovery talks and how they had found peace within themselves, because they can't stay sober because they hated their lives, right? They couldn't manage sobriety because sobriety sucks, because I fucking hate myself. And drugs and alcohol took that away. But drugs and alcohol were so destructive that I had to stop drinking. And then in sobriety, things got so miserable and self-destructive, I wanted to kill myself. And when they described that over and over and over again in their own language, I sunk in my chair, because I thought, that's what's wrong with me. I can't stay sober because I fucking hate sobriety and I hate myself. Getting loaded numbs that, dulls that. It doesn't make it disappear entirely. And the older I get, the less effective it is. And I think that's how most people find themselves at the crossroads, so to speak, at the jumping off place, whatever you want to call it, where it's like, I don't want to change, but you know, what do they say about the fear of change outweighing the fear of staying the same, or the pain of staying the same? And that's where I was. They explained it. They explained what alcoholism is in super plain language, and to me, it was a fucking revelation. I didn't know anyone had ever experienced what I was experiencing. I wasn't able to articulate it, and I'd certainly never heard anybody talk about it. I'd never heard anybody describe staying sober the way they did. I thought these shiny, happy fuckers just got sober, and they were clearly different than me, because I can't get sober. I can get sober. I can't stay sober. Right. And these guys described it in plain language. They couldn't stay sober because they hated themselves. And I asked those guys after the meeting what I should do. And they outlined a real simple plan, the way you would or anybody would. And having no idea the level of commitment I was making, I said, okay.
I think that when it's very similar, and I love that you brought up that word hate, because when I had overdosed twice and I was in the hospital, and the second time they're like, okay, we can't just discharge you. We have to send you to the mental health unit on the 4th floor. And so I did. And so I was sitting there just kind of shooting the shit with a guy I didn't even know. I thought he was like a doctor or a therapist or some psychologist doing a mental eval. Within 15 minutes, like I didn't know, right? I've never experienced an AA meeting. Like I didn't even know anything. So here I am, just overdosed on the mental health unit. This guy starts telling me his story, and he looked at me and goes, man, he goes, why are you so angry? And I'm like, I'm not angry. He goes, why are you so angry? And I started to get angry. I'm like, you ask me that again, I'm gonna get angry. But like, ask anybody in my life, like they, you know, like I'll be there for them. I'll do this for them. Da-da. He goes, why are you so angry? And he goes, don't answer. He goes, because let me tell you this. Anybody who's trying to get HIV on purpose, anybody who is doing meth and doing the hardcore partying and having the hardcore sex that you are having, does not love themselves.
Right.
Because if you loved yourself, you wouldn't be trying to hurt and harm yourself. And that is what you're doing. This was not a psychologist. He wasn't a therapist. He wasn't even a counselor. He's a recovered meth addict, right? Who was able to see and cut through me like nobody was able to cut through me before. And I think that is the power of 12-step programs. Okay, like that could be the power of a 12-step program, because these are people who've walked in your shoes. These are people who can truly look at you and say, I know. I get it. I know, because I know how shitty it was. And doctors can't do that, because a lot of doctors aren't recovered drug addicts, right?
Unless they are. But you're 100%
A lot of psychologists aren't that. And sometimes another addict needs to know, I get you. You are truly not alone. And no, asshole, you're not unique. Like, get that out of your head.
Are you sure? Because I really feel like I'm the only one.
You know, and so I think that's the uniqueness. So you hit your rock bottom. What took you to your life, I'm not big on how much time somebody has in recovery. So I'm not big on asking how much time you got. But at what point in your recovery did you find this purpose? Did you find your path into creating a healing center?
I got to tell you, first off, when I was newly sober, like in my first couple of years, a lot of my friends, people I got sober with, were going to work in recovery, and I scoffed. I was like, have fun. Sounds fucking terrible. And, I've always been heavily involved, in service work. So I already spent a lot of my spare time working with guys and
for sure
carrying the message, etc. So in my mind, to go be like a peer support or go be a therapist sounds fucking awful. But over time, I'm entrepreneurial. I got into digital marketing and software, and I said I met a guy to show him the book, show him the steps, who was living in a treatment center, and it was a pretty nice place, right? I won't name it, but I walked into this facility, looked around, I was like, it's pretty nice in here. Sit down, they're like cooking lunch, and guy's like, yeah, I've been here for like a week. I don't really know what's what. And I remember thinking to myself, how cool would it be to run a place like this? And I could be the crotchety old 12-step guy, wave my finger at people. When I was new, we used to go walk uphill both ways to meetings in the snow or whatever. But I romanticized the idea of working in treatment, or at least running a treatment center, to where maybe I wasn't necessarily a therapist, but I grew into the notion. So many years sober. I was over 10.
Okay.
When I had the idea, and then we've been open 3 years now. So we got into really fleshing the idea out on paper, I suppose, summer of 2017.
Wow. That's awesome, because I started really getting the itch to want to work and be part of and create a healing center, because my therapist, I go back, she brought out her notes. This was recent. She goes, you actually brought up wanting to create a healing center about 3 years ago in one of our sessions, and she asked me, what does that look like? And I'm like, and this is my experience with 12-step rooms, and I believe you're of the 12, you're the AA plus what, right?
Sure.
That AA plus model, 12 steps plus what model, because I'm sorry, like 12 steps is just not enough. And if anybody wants to fight back with me, we can look at the efficacy rate of just 12 steps. I'm sorry, 12 steps is not enough. And if you think 30 or 40% efficacy is good, I've got a few professors who would tell you that would be a failing grade, Sure.
Well, and we got into that a little bit on the last talk
podcast.
We had. Yeah. Last talk we had, we got into that a little bit. I'm of the opinion, like you, I share the same opinion, that everything we can possibly use at our disposal
100%
to help someone recover I'm in favor of.
Yeah.
And I'm abstinence-based, so I could use that as a caveat. So anything you can use that still promotes a long-term abstinence-based durable recovery, I'm totally in support of.
Yeah, and it's healing, and that's the unique thing, right? A healing center is different than just a treatment center, right? A healing center really uses different modalities, and even on a spiritual basis as well, to heal the mind, body, and soul. And to me, the amount of damage that addicts and alcoholics, the amount of damage that we do to our bodies, but it goes beyond that. And that is why I'm a huge believer that trauma is really the root of so much. And until we go back and heal from that traumatic event or heal from that trauma, we will continue to either relapse or we will continue to make poor life choices, even if we are in the rooms of recovery. Even if you've strung together 30 plus years in a 12-step room, you could be white knuckling it because you haven't gone back to actually heal from that trauma, which is why I'm a huge believer in the modality of EMDR, brain mapping, neuroplasticity. Like I'm a believer of science that we can and have the ability to rewire our brains. And also the spiritual aspect. Like I would love to have a shaman on the property if I ever did create a healing center, because I believe spirituality should become a part of our growth. I'm not asking you to become religious, not asking you, right? Spirituality is so different in my mind than what that is, because yours is a healing center. So what are some of the modalities that you guys offer at Cornerstone Healing that you believe is really making an impact on an addict's life?
Well, you're naming them. So trauma, we believe, is often such a large such a large factor of what we're dealing with. So EMDR and brain mapping are both staple components. Also staple components are physical fitness.
Huge.
Yeah. So we've had a gym component and used trainers ever since we opened, but just in the last month or so, we've really started to build out our own gym. So it's getting better, obviously, as time goes on. We're building out our own internal gym.
That's the wellness aspect. That's the physical wellness. We do know that exercising increases, like it releases the dopamine, right? Increases the serotonin, gets us those happy cells working again, and we need that in our daily lives.
Oh my gosh, the list of biological, physiological, emotional benefits from physical exercise, particularly resistance training, it's long. It's long.
Again, it's science-based. So let's look at science. Yeah. Let's look at science as based in fact and how we can use that science to better us.
So at Cornerstone, we weight train daily.
I love that. And by the way, when I toured, when I went over there to check out Cornerstone in Scottsdale, like we were walking through the facility and all of a sudden you walk into this massive like gym garage and you're like, damn, they're working out. And they were working out that day.
Right. So they work out with it. They train with a trainer 5 days a week. Now, some of our guys will elect to train also on Saturday or Sunday. That's up to them if they want to, but it's part of what we do Monday through Friday.
I love that. Yeah. Okay, so and then talk to me about some of the other things that you guys are doing there, because you do inpatient, right? You guys have houses where you do offer inpatient or outpatient.
So I hate to get semantical. So currently we do outpatient, and it's like a long step down care. So most of our partial hospitalization clients will stay in our supportive housing, which does offer a completely immersive experience. So it's like I'm going to rehab. They show up with a bag and they check in with us with the intention of staying a couple of months.
Right.
To live with us 24 hours a day, prepare all their meals with us, meditate with us, pray with us, lift weights with us, and get into the heavy lifting of going into the past and sorting it out. That being said, we then do an intensive outpatient, typically in the evenings for another couple of months after that. And then we work with clients on a coaching basis. So we call them navigators. They'll work with a sort of a sophisticated case manager all the way up until they've got a year of sobriety.
Since you are the founder of the Healing Center right now, let's talk about a current event that's going on, because I'm curious as to see what you are seeing right now with a lot of your residents and the people that you're caring for, and the impact that the pandemic in 2020 is having on people's mental health.
Before I tell you what I've seen, I do want to mention sort of a caveat. Like, listen, I don't have the answers for what the world should have done differently. So I don't want to place blame anywhere. This is a big, scary thing. They were calling it the novel coronavirus, right? Because none of us had ever seen anything like this before. But I got to tell you, as a behavioral health professional, isolating people is one of the worst things we could have done. And I understand the reasons we did it. No. I understand. Again, I'm not here to place blame anywhere. But we have increased the number of lives. We've increased the number of lives taken by this pandemic exponentially by some of the measures we've taken. Some of the stay-at-home orders have doubled suicide rates. Yeah. We've increased death by overdose 40 to 50%.
I think it's
depending on where you're at. I mean,
depending on where you're at, because
there's
a study that came up
country.
160% of overdose deaths over just the months of the past summer compared to 2019.
Yeah, I've been following the overdose mapping application program. And it's the OD map. If you Google it, you can kind of follow along what's going on. If you look just at the Arizona numbers, I mean, it'll make you throw up in your mouth. Yeah. I mean, it's disgusting.
I know
how many people are dying. And listen, there were a lot of people dying before shutdowns and stay-at-home orders. And again, not necessarily having the answers for what everyone should do. I'm of the strong opinion that if you can take whatever resources you have as a human being living in America in 2021, if you're struggling with addiction, if you've got mental health issues going, and you're just allowing the fact that everybody's kind of keeping to themselves be an excuse to not engage, I would encourage you, pick up the courage, pick up your phone and call someone.
Yeah.
You can FaceTime, You can get on Zoom. There's Zoom meetings that are happening all over the world 24 hours a day.
Yeah, I've hopped on quite a few in
Right.
different states.
Right.
Like you don't even have, I mean, it's actually more accessible than trying to find a meeting, driving
Right.
to it, getting it at that right time.
Right.
You know, it's,
Look, and if you don't have any underlying health conditions, like I don't, you can throw on a mask and you can hit in-person meetings.
Yeah.
There's not as many as there used to be, obviously, and a lot of them have disbanded and kind of regrouped other places, but they exist and they're out there. A lot of major cities, you can still go to in-person 12-step, other types of support groups.
and I'm really with you on that too. And you know, there is no right answer. Like there is no one magic bullet.
It's complicated.
It's very, very complicated because I understand that, you know, we do have high risk populations in this country that we really do need to protect.
Yeah, nobody wants to kill grandma.
No, nobody does, you know, but you know, from somebody on the mental health aspect side of it, we're going to, in February and in March, we're going a year, you know, into this. And you cannot deny the fact that people are killing themselves, overdosing, and committing suicides because of isolation. And what people who aren't familiar with mental health need to understand is that the opposite of addiction is connection. Like, you take away the connection, we are going to have serious death in this country. And again, we're not sitting here saying that we have the right answer to it, but damn it, we need to be, we need to acknowledge as a country that people who are just saying, hey, close everything down, stay at home for months and months and months, you're also saying that we're going to have a lot of death from people committing suicide and suffering mental health. And no, it is not because they are weak.
Yeah, all politics completely aside, I am pro-mask, I'm pro-safety, and I'm anti-shutdowns.
Yeah. Because I think that if we can get to that place of where, hey, listen, if you're going to go out, just put a mask on, okay? Like, you can go and do these things. You just have to be a little more cautious. Is that too much to ask?
It's really not. Vaccines are coming. There are people starting to get vaccinated.
Which is a good thing. And it
really is.
We need to get to that herd immunity aspect, you know, and we do that by getting the vaccine out into the arms of people.
You know, putting aside how we're going to get there as as a country, because the truth is we're gonna get there.
Yeah.
Whether it's 6 months from now, whether it's 6 years from now, if I had to guess, look, I have no medical degree, so what is it?
I'm gonna have hopeful faith that we'll be there by the end of the summer.
I like that.
Yeah.
We'll go with your answer.
Yeah.
All right. So sometime soon, within the next year, we're going to be mostly past this.
Yes.
What about the people that didn't survive this?
Right.
And I don't mean from catching coronavirus. I mean the people that didn't survive isolation. We're losing north of 500 people a day to accidental death by overdose in America. And it's already the third leading cause of death for decades.
Yep.
We're talking for a long time.
Because we as a country have failed to provide mental health services to people in our country.
And in addition to that, what you're doing here, reducing the stigma, we've allowed as a culture too long for shame and guilt to be associated with the disease of addiction or with mental health. We've allowed people to be, you said something on my show about drug addicts and alcoholics being viewed as fuck ups and mess ups and people with no passion for life. And as long as we see an alcoholic as the person flying the sign at the freeway entrance and it's contained to that, we're going to continue to shame people.
Yep.
And here's the thing, when we shame people, it's usually a small remark here or there. Oh, really? Like, it's a scoff. It's something that costs us nothing and costs the person suffering who hears that remark and is scared to take time off to go to treatment, and yet they're contemplating suicide actively. Yeah. It could cost that person everything.
100%. You're absolutely right, and I love that conversation about the stigma because that stigma is also, as you just said, the stigma is killing people. The stigma is killing people because they don't want to ask for help, because there is so much shame that if you go to your boss and say, I'm struggling right now, that your boss is going to look at you like you're weak. Oh, they can't handle the job. They're not good enough. They're not smart enough. And it's one of the reasons why I'm trying to get people to be like, I get the anonymity aspect of it, right? But the anonymity aspect of it to me is created because of shame. because the stigma existed that we had to create a program based in anonymity because we didn't want to out that person to be known to society as a weak person who couldn't handle their shit.
Sure.
So that's the anonymity part. The anonymity part is built in shame. Well, guess what? If we got rid of the anonymity part, we will see that doctors, professors, pharmacists, therapists, news anchors are all addicts. And guess what that tells? That tells the other people out there, wow, I'm not stupid. These really smart people have addiction in their past.
There's this notion, and I think it's been amplified maybe in the last 20 or 30 years, even within the recovery rooms, in 12-step culture, where if you haven't been to prison or if you haven't, you can start creating this list of things. It's almost like this bloodlust when we hear stories like, how bad was it? And if it wasn't bad enough, like maybe you're not the real thing. And the truth is, if we're talking about 12-step world, the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous was written by a surgeon and a very successful stockbroker. So these weren't bottom of the barrel type of dudes.
Right.
They were actually like fairly sophisticated professionals
that
created the original 12-step idea or concept. And then you flash forward, 80 plus years, and we've got all kinds of people from all kinds of professions, because alcoholism / addiction, it doesn't matter what race you are. It doesn't matter. You could slice up demographics any which way you want. Alcoholism or drug addicts are represented in every major demographic cohort you can imagine. Everyone, every single one.
Everyone. As a matter of fact, it's just, people with money have an easier time to cover it up. That's really what the difference. There's no difference between an alcoholic mom up in Paradise Valley or up in, what's that, Ladera? No, not Ladera Ranch is in Orange County. What's that ranch?
DC Ranch?
DC Ranch. Like, no, they just got money to cover it up a little bit better than the person over in Maryvale.
Sure. And I think that's something each of us has to take on when we're working with new people that are new to recovery. So I started getting fucked up when I was a kid. So I got sober pretty young. I got sober at 26.
I was 28.
Right. So for me, doing adult shit and finding a career path and finding financial success went in parallel with recovery for me. So for me, like, you get sober and you can buy a BMW. Like, you can do that because you're sober. But that's not everybody's story. So plenty of people get sober and they've got BMWs or whatever.
Right.
They've got a home, and that's not everyone's story. And that was actually sort of an aha moment for me when I was newish. I was like, some people don't drink to blackout when they're fucking teenagers. Some people don't do that until they're 40 and decide that they need to get sober. And they've already got a business and a marriage and children and et cetera, fill in the blank.
Right.
And when you really start to peel off the layers, you start to realize that what we're dealing with is an illness. Has nothing to do with your social status, has nothing to do with your economic status, has nothing to do with your race, your religion, your sexual orientation, or any other label you can put on a human being. If you're a human, there's a 15 to 20% chance you might be an alcoholic.
Right.
It's 15 to 20% of the population. That's 2 out of 10.
Right. Join the club.
Yep.
What do you say to people out there right now? I am dealing with I'm dealing with the situation right now about trying to convince somebody that they have their life is destructive. Friend comes to me, says wife or husband is boozing all the time and they're doing this and they're doing that. How do I get them to see their rock bottom? That's it kind of moves into that whole interventionist thing, is that we try to get an interventionist is really trying to get somebody to recognize their rock bottom sooner than when they'll see it. What's your aspect on that? I would love just to get your take, because I know you deal with intake all the time. You deal with these phone calls all the time. How do you get somebody to recognize their rock bottom when they're not necessarily seeing it yet?
It's an interesting question. And it's very relevant because I know what a nightmare it is to be the loved one who's trying to help someone who doesn't necessarily want help. So to answer the question, it's very tricky. So when we think about a person who's qualified to come into treatment, they have to need the services we offer, and they have to have the resources to be able to pay for it, i.e. insurance or whatever the cost is. And the question comes up, well, what if they don't want it? Does that make them, are they qualified for treatment? Well, that's kind of a gray area, because I got to tell you, I wanted my life to get better, but I didn't really want to get sober when I got sober. Most of us who find permanent or lasting recovery, durable recovery, most of us kind of come in kicking and screaming to some degree or other. So it's really tricky. How do you present it in a way that the message can be heard? I think genuine concern. I know some interventionists, and they're pretty savage with this stuff.
Yeah, I know a few too. They're amazing. They're really good at having compassion and empathy, but they're really good at reading the subject. What does this subject need in order for me to get through to them? What I tell people all the time too, I was like, well, you have to show them what they will lose if they continue down this path.
That is definitely
parental rights.
That's one tactic to be able to try and paint a picture, because those consequences, when they pile up, aren't necessarily enough to keep someone sober, right? But at least not in many cases. But it can often be enough to be the catalyst for change. And so sometimes sitting somebody down and saying, listen, what's going on with you? You may not want to admit this, but it's starting to tear us apart. And whoever that is, whether it's to the child, to the parent, in some cases, I deal with those, with the spouse. I love you, but I'm reaching a point where I can no longer do this. I can't watch you kill yourself anymore. Whatever the case is, being able to have an honest and forthright conversation, I think is the starting point of that. And then, being ready to draw boundaries. And not even, some people can look at that and go, oh, well, you're just shaming sick people now. And it's like, well, I think there's a balance, right? And it's more of an art than a science. I think if you can draw boundaries, healthy boundaries for yourself, and say, listen, I love you, but at some point I can't support this behavior. I mean, that's your right to do as a human being. I have little kids, and I hope that I never have to make these decisions,
right?
Where they're concerned.
So what do you, as we kind of begin to close this episode, what do you tell people right now, as somebody who created a healing center here in the Valley, knowing that people right now are suffering from mental health, that a lot of people out there right now, whether it's depression, anxiety, whether they're, going and using food, or they're gambling, their porn addiction, right? I mean, we can all numb ourselves in so many different ways. It doesn't just have to be...
It's a whack-a-mole.
Right, it is. Truly, it's like whack-a-mole. It's like not everybody turns to drugs and alcohol to cope. It doesn't mean that they're not an addict. So what's your closing message to people living in this time right now? There's a lot of mental health issues. You have a recovery center. What would be that message?
Connect with other people as often as you can. When we connect with other human beings, there's an opportunity for accountability. There's opportunity for humor and laughter and just being with each other, even if things are fucked up. I gotta tell you, if you've ever lost someone close to you, one of the best things somebody can do is just to be with you. People struggle to find the right things to say. You don't have to have the right thing to say. What are you, Yoda? You don't have to be Yoda. You could just be with someone. And that's the one thing that's in the way right now, is there's a lot of isolation. So I would encourage anyone to just connect, even if that's only over a phone, but pick up the phone.
Yeah.
Connect with other people. Share your life. Share your day-to-day with other people.
I'm a huge fan of that, because like I said, the opposite of addiction is connection. And that's the reason it's playing out. I mean, it's the reason why we've been talking about how there's so many overdose deaths. You take away that connection, addicts will die, and I've been very honest in multiple podcasts recently through this pandemic. I've hit my own rough times, in this. And you look at my life, I got every resource available, right? I work in recovery. I've connected to people in recovery. I've got every resource. But let me tell you this, when my brain got hijacked not too long ago, I didn't pick up the phone to call those resources, right? I live here alone. I work in news. So it's just like a therapist who is hearing stories from people all day. Well, a therapist needs a therapist, right? Yes. So I'm in news, yes. So I'm talking about the pandemic every damn day, and I'm talking about the election every damn day. Got threats coming in from different ways. It pushed me to my breaking point. I was having violent shakes at night, PTSD, tremors at night in my bedroom, and this is in the last couple of months. And I tell that to people to hopefully let them know that you're not alone if you're experiencing that, and it's okay to not be okay.
Yes.
But I should not have let it get to that point, and I should have just increased my therapy sessions. So whatever we can do as people right now to increase our wellness, don't have shame in doing that. Like, I needed 2 hours of trauma therapy a week right now. That's what my body needs. It's what I need to keep me on track so I don't fall back into that level, because it really is one day at a time. And I know it's a saying, it's like a slogan in 12-step rooms, but it is. And that's the reason why I don't even count my days anymore.
Sure.
Because I'm like, okay, if I were to tell you I had 12 years, okay, but then I tell you I was having night tremors, of PTSD attacks, and I almost hit my crack pipe.
That's what 12 years looks like?
Right. That's what I have to look forward to. No, man, because what I'm telling you is all I got is today. Am I well today? Is my mental health good today? Damn it. Awesome. Then I'm not going to drink or use. It doesn't matter how much time I have in recovery. How am I doing today? And that is the message I give out to people. Don't look at me at 12 years and be like, oh man, put them on a pedestal. Yo, fuck that. Judge me. I was literally buying weighted blankets so I didn't tremor at night. So trauma can come up at any point in our lives, right? And so I just encourage people to go out there and seek the help that they need without shame.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, whether it's reaching out to a therapist or just picking up the phone and calling somebody that you know.
One thing I do wish, which I'm a really big believer of this too, is that I wish I didn't just do AA when I got sober. I'm telling you, like I never went to treatment. I never went to treatment ever. I never went to rehab. I didn't. But let me tell you, did I stay sober? Yes. But let me tell you, my life would have been so much better and easier had I gone to treatment for 30 or 60 days and then went and did 12-step meetings.
I am of a very similar opinion. I believe that any good therapist would suggest, if you're an addict, I would think any good therapist would suggest that you check out 12-Step World and work steps with a sponsor. And I think any good 12-step sponsor would recommend a good therapist.
100%. 100%.
They're not at opposition with each other at all.
Because if you have if you have the ability to go to a place like Cornerstone Healing Center and you're new, you're an addict, they're going to give you EMDR. They're going to brain map you. They're going to figure out, okay, what's the best way to triage this? Let's get to the trauma. Let's begin to work through and process that trauma. And then we'll get you on the road to 12 steps and group counseling, really what it is, and, be able to do those things. Man, I white knuckled it so much in those first couple of years. Oh, it was terrible. And it took me until year eight to unpack my childhood trauma. Are you kidding me?
I had one of those, I had what they describe as like the psychic change at about 6 months. And yeah, I've always wondered if I had been in treatment or been working with a therapist, could I have come to that conclusion earlier? Because those are tenuous. I mean, I cried myself to sleep with suicidal thoughts for a lot of those months. Yeah. So I don't know. That's my preaching of the message. I'm just a huge believer now in telling people when they come to me, what do I do? Go to at least a 35-day treatment program. Get that foundation under your belt, and then go work the 12 steps. And then do your daily meetings and do those things. But I'm in agreement. At the very least, it's good stabilization.
Yes.
Take you out of your environment. Take a pause from the chaos.
Yep.
Step away from your typical environment.
Yeah. I just want to see efficacy. I want to see those numbers increase. And I think the only way we do that is by going to places that have a healing center that is offering these different modalities. Because damn it, we need to update that big book.
Right. Well, if you can keep someone in a structured recovery environment for over 12 months, the efficacy rates are over 65%.
Right.
Yeah. So sorry, our program's a year long.
Correct.
It's exactly why it's a year long, because we want to see at least 6, 7 out of 10 people that walk through our door stay sober, not just for a year, to stay sober permanently.
Correct. And it's not just 30 days and then you're done. These treatment centers know it's 30, 35 days, maybe it's 60 days, fine. But then it's continuous care after. Yeah. You're going to feel real great after 30 days of being around treatment and shamans and healing centers and EMDR.
Yeah, thanks for all the help, guys. I'll see you later. I got it from here.
But it's a lifelong thing, which is the program. You need to find a program like Cornerstone that will actually create a program for you aftercare so that you can continue to stay sober. So if you are listening or watching the podcast right now and you're suffering right now in the pandemic, or maybe your husband, your spouse, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, or somebody in your life is numbing themselves with booze or drugs or food or gambling right now because of the pandemic or just because life is getting too hard, reach out to a treatment center. So Cornerstone Healing Center, if you want more information about what they offer and what they serve and how they're bettering the community, we're going to give you all that information right now. This podcast is sponsored by Cornerstone Healing Center, where they guide people through a transformative experience and into lasting recovery. They focus on addiction, trauma, family systems, and co-occurring disorders. If you want more information on how to get sober, call them at 1-888-320-7992 or check out their website, scottsdalecornerstone.com.